During the summer when I was home from college, I worked with a couple of friends as a morning cleaner at the local movie theater. It was fairly new, built in the early 90s, with 3 big screen rooms, 4 mid-size screens, and 3 small screens. My job as morning cleaner was to clean all the screening rooms during a shift that went from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. It would take me about 20 minutes to get to work from where I lived. The theater was out in an area that was kind of in the middle of nowhere. Before the area was renovated, we were told it was part wetland, farmland, and the rest owned by the local nature center. The first couple of weeks that I worked there, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Typically, there would only be 2 or 3 of us working a shift. There was a lot of time spent by yourself, cleaning and listening to your iPod. Occasionally, we'd meet up with the day shift in the morning and give them a breakdown of maintenance issues that we were dealing with, and other things they'd like us to look at. One day in particular, my manager asked me if we had noticed the front doors being unlocked when we arrived in the morning. When I said no, the manager went on to tell me that customers, primarily women, were complaining about a tall, lanky man in a suit that had been following them from theater to theater, and sometimes into the bathroom. Several times women had come to the front desk, frightened out of their minds, describing a 7-foot-tall man in a black suit, complete with bowler cap, that walked slowly after them. A few times even the police were called. Teenagers that worked the day shift referred to him as the tall man. While he primarily targeted women, occasionally a male co-worker would catch a glimpse of him, sneaking into a theater. On a couple of occasions, they would pursue him, thinking it was someone trying to sneak into a movie, only to find nobody there. We had 12 theater rooms total, but Theater 5 was the worst. Nobody wanted to clean out Theater 5. When I first started, I was fairly naive about ghosts and spirits, and I didn't understand why even my boss was apprehensive about Theater 5 and kept assigning me to be the one to clean it out. What made Theater 5 unique was that it sat behind the bathrooms in the lobby, so to get to the sitting area, you had to walk down a long hallway before reaching the screening room. Being that far back, you were the most secluded, especially when it's 4 a.m. and the only other people you're with are on the other side of the building. People cleaning there would complain of nosebleeds, constant headaches, and a feeling of being watched. My first supernatural experience took place here. It was a normal morning. I had just finished sweeping out the lobby, and I was taking care of the cups and other garbage in Theater 5. By routine, you go through and throw away leftover cups and popcorn before vacuuming and sweeping the area. I had my iPod on, and as I was going through throwing cups away, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind me. I kept turning around, even at some points taking out my earphones and shouting, "Hello." Of course, there was nobody there. Like I said, it was a normal morning, and I had no reason to suspect anything. I went about my routine. About 20 minutes later, I'm at the top back row, sweeping out garbage from under the seats when I hear footsteps. Someone running. I look down, and at the front of the theater, I catch a glimpse of a little blonde-haired boy turning the corner into the long hallway as he ran out of the theater. Immediately, I threw down my broom and chased after him. I ran down the hallway and out into the lobby, but there was no kid. I walked further into the lobby and saw my boss through the front entrance on a smoke break. "Who was that kid?" I asked. My boss, Jeff, looked at me. For a moment he was confused, but then he laughed. "So you met Charlie." I'll never forget how casually he said it. Charlie was another thing customers constantly complained about. On several occasions, they claimed a little blonde-haired boy was running up and down the aisles in the theater, causing all kinds of noise and ruckus during the movie. Of course, it was in Theater 5. When an usher would come to apprehend the child, he would have already disappeared. The female staff affectionately named him Charlie, after his resemblance to the character in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Charlie was also responsible for knocking several cans of garbage over, throwing papers around, misplacing things, and generally making being a morning cleaner a real pain in the butt. Charlie was more of a nuisance than anything. We used to theorize that he was the son of the tall man, but the two were never seen together. My only encounter with the tall man came a couple weeks after my run-in with Charlie. I had yet to hear about him at this point. Had I known, I most likely would have quit sooner rather than later. Usually in the morning, if you're the first to arrive, it's your job to walk up into the projector rooms and turn on the lights in all theaters. This is an easy task, except the top floor with the projects has a lot of life-size cutouts of movie characters and massive posters, and in the dark it can be a little creepy. I had done this several times before, and since I was the first to arrive, I go about turning all the lights on. The projector area itself is dark. Typically we'd carry a flashlight with us while going around flipping switches. That morning I couldn't find the flashlight. We'd later find it in the garbage, Charlie's fault, so I walked through the dark hallway of projectors, flipping all the switches. I had stayed up all night prior, watching the Andy Griffith Show. I remember because I was whistling the theme song to myself as I walked down the corridor. Once again, I got that feeling of being watched, and something several yards away, in the area with the projectors overlooking the IMAX theater rooms, was staring back at me. I stopped whistling and tried to focus my eyes. It was a cardboard cutout. They were everywhere, so I kind of dismissed it and was about to flip the next switch when the cutout moved. I froze. What I thought was a cutout was actually a figure hunched over. Quietly, it was whistling the Andy Griffith theme song, imitating me, only doing it much more slowly. Slowly, it rose up from its crouch, revealing itself to be at least 7 feet tall. It was a man. All I could see was a silhouette against the red exit sign lights and some of the projector computer monitors. It started toward me, whistling quietly. I wanted to move, but for some reason my feet were cemented in the spot and I had cotton for a tongue. I didn't know what to do. Slowly, the tall man stepped toward me. He walked with a bit of a waddle, as if he had a bit of a limp in his left leg. I couldn't exactly tell. He had taken about 3 or 4 steps toward me when something caught his attention and he turned and walked into an office down the hall. I turned back and ran down the steps and waited outside the theater until my boss and the rest of the crew arrived. I told them what had happened, and they explained that the tall man existed, but he wasn't going to hurt me. I didn't care. That experience alone was enough to make me put in my 2 weeks' notice. When I was 13 years old, I had gotten my period for the first time and ended up sleeping on my back. I'm an avid side sleeper, so this is a really weird position for me. That night I had a dream, and in that dream I was sitting in a chair. I was leaning on its back legs, and suddenly the chair started to slowly lean further and further back until I drifted into the eternity below me. This freaked me out, and I jolted awake. When I awoke, there was a figure leaning or hovering directly above my face, and all I saw was a hooded white, flat, ovular, and relatively featureless face with big, ovular, glassy eyes, and an expression like it was determined to devour my eternal soul. The face was humanoid, very two-dimensional, with thin, quivering, angry lips, and 2 holes where its nose would be, with eyebrows arched high up onto its forehead. I could feel an unworldly hate burning right through me as it loomed over me. It was absolutely the most helpless I have ever felt and would ever feel, because it was more than just my life I felt was at stake. I tried to move, scream, breathe, anything, but I couldn't. It was paralyzing me with its hate. I finally was able to let out the tiniest whimper, and as soon as the sound escaped me, it stood straight up and paced back and forth at the foot of my bed, still staring. It was like a force field was erected around me, and the frustration of it trying to get at me again was radiating throughout the room. It looked like a starving tiger behind glass, longing to lunge at its vulnerable prey, if only it weren't for the barrier between us. It was tall, almost all the way to the ceiling, tall and very thin, wearing a long black cloak that covered everything except that terrifying face. I realized that it hadn't been floating over me, it had stood at the foot of my bed and leaned over it to hover its face over mine. I sat up in my bed, still frozen, just staring at it. My closet door behind it was cracked a few inches, and it swooped in there and peered out at me, never having broken eye contact. It continued to stare, quivering with hate and frustration until it slowly faded away. I turned my light on, and it stayed on at night for a long time. I never slept with that closet door open again, and I didn't sleep again that night. I stayed the night in the living room with all of the lights on, just sitting on the couch. I later dismissed it as sleep paralysis for several years. It was a very believable and plausible explanation. Then I became friends with a girl who confided in me and told me a story. She was up late at night by herself with her door open. Something out in the living room by the kitchen caught her eye, and when she looked at it, she saw a figure standing there, beckoning her to approach it. She looked away, refocused on it, and it was still there. When she described what she saw, she described the exact same creature that had attacked me. We each got a sketchbook and drew what we saw, and when she showed me hers, I was staring at my attacker all over again. She had never heard my story before telling hers, so I don't know how both of us had the exact same entity in our dream or sleep paralysis or whatever. I'm a native from the Kiowa tribe. Whether this has any bearing on the occurrence that I'm about to describe, I don't know. It's merely for descriptive purposes. In any case, I grew up in a housing addition where most of the Kiowas in my hometown lived since the addition was built. There were several other kids my age who lived there too. It consists of 3 streets connected by 2 streets on either side. My grandma's house is on one of the corners at the end of the middle street. The street that connects all 3 main streets is bordered by a standard-sized farmer's barbed wire fence with farmers' properties on the other side. There's a street lamp on the corner just outside my grandma's house. One night when I was about 15 or so, I was out under that lamp with 2 friends talking and joking and whatnot. Suddenly, I notice an animal-like figure sitting by the fence in the corner where the other main street starts. There's a street lamp there as well, but the figure was sitting in a spot that was obscured by shadows caused by a couple large trees with overhanging branches. It is facing away from the fence, is very still and makes no sound. It appears to be all black, sits in its hind legs like a canine, and I can clearly see its eyes emitting a soft yellow glow. I point it out to my friends and ask, "What is that?" They turn to look, and we all stare, trying to make sense of it. It looks straight at us for a few seconds that seem like eternity. Then in one fluid motion, turning while it jumps over the fence a good 5 feet high. It disappears into the darkness, making no sound, though there was only tall grass and fallen leaves and branches on the other side of the fence. Needless to say, we noped right out of there to my friend's grandma's house on the street on the far end of where we saw the creature. My family was at a powwow, so nobody was at my grandma's house, and there was no way I was staying there alone after that. We told my friend's grandma what we saw, and she told us there are many mysterious things in the dark in the area of Oklahoma. I come from deep southwest, and to just be glad that it wasn't malignant. There are many strange things that happen out there, especially when it's dark. While I was deployed in Kosovo, my team and I did a lot of night missions that required us to cover a great deal of ground in a short period of time in order to make our extractions, all of it, while remaining undetected by anyone in the areas that we would pass through. We would always seem to see odd things during the night, but nothing like the one I'm going to tell you. During one of our recon missions, we had started by getting dropped off in a remote location to identify whether shipments of mortar rounds and mines were being moved through the area. Our extract was going to be before daybreak, and we needed to make it just over 17 kilometers. The terrain wasn't too overgrown, and we had good intel over the area, and it was either a full moon or close to it. So unless we encountered somebody, this was going to be an easy night. Our team was normally only 4 men, but we had the opportunity to make this a good training run for some of the new guys, and we took on an extra 3. We still wanted to make sure we played it safe though, so I took rear security and my friend, we'll call him Luke, took the position just in front of me. We both worked great together and could easily manage to cover our team if needed. We moved about 10 kilometers through our mission area without finding anything and had made good time doing it. At this point, we needed to start heading for our extraction point, which was located over a good-sized hill and then through an area that was near a village, but not too close. We regrouped, did a count of people, ammo, and supplies, and moved out. Being rear security, I was the last to move, and just as I was about to take off, I heard a noise in the trees maybe 50 meters off. I turned and saw Luke looking at the direction as well. He had heard it too. Everyone else was still moving, since the new guys were in the middle and were not used to looking back every 20 meters to spot your security. We were getting left. Chances were that the noise was nothing more than a deer, but Luke and I started moving out, using a 2-man bounding technique. We kept hearing a noise, so I told Luke to reach the team while I remained in place after our next bound. I found a place with cover and he bolted after the team. I heard the noise again and then saw trees move about 15 meters in front of me. Everything stopped. 2 minutes went by with me being very quiet, controlling my breathing and watching my front and sides. Luke and my team were slowly making their way to engage whatever had been following us. They came up on the sides and surrounded the area I signaled to. Once in position, I moved up. Nothing, not footprints, tracks, or any sign that something had been there. Cue the guys giving Luke and I a hard time for getting left alone and scared in good-hearted fun, of course. We move out again. Again, I am the last to move, with Luke between myself and the next man to the front. This time, no noises when I step away. After about 2 kilometers, we come up to an orchard that we need to move through. The light from the moon was really bright and the trees were spaced, so we used them for cover as we stayed near the middle of the orchard. Just before I enter, I hear the noise again. This time, I thought I heard a little girl giggling, not something that my imagination would make up on its own. I was expecting wildlife, if anything. This time, Luke had taken off an additional 20 meters and turned to wait for me. I moved to my location and he moved out again. I was crouched next to a tree watching for anything. All of a sudden, the tree I was next to caught my attention. In the knots on the tree, I could see a face that looked like a person. As I squinted and looked more closely, a little girl's face appears and she turns at me smiling, waving a little hand and giggles, not maliciously, then disappears back into the tree. I am in absolute shock at this point, and there is not a chance in hell that I am going back to my team to report what I just saw. So instead, I bolt and catch up to Luke and keep my mouth shut. Recognizing that I likely have lost my mind, I am not going to talk about anything. We hit our extract and leave. 2 weeks go by, and I am told that I am needed to provide security for a team of combat engineers who are going through an area I am familiar with. In the meantime, my team was going to be going through the area we were in 2 weeks ago where Luke and I got scared. Again, I never said a word to anyone about what I saw. In my mind, I am quite happy about not going back there. So I go out with the engineers and help them find a minefield that had been recently laid in an area that kids walk through every day. And they take care of informing the village nearby while starting to blow the mines in place. I really appreciate the engineers and the work they did out there. I get back and am taken to see my commander and told thanks for the work. Feeling great, I head back to my barracks room, a place I rarely get to visit, and see that none of the guys are back yet. No sooner than taking my boots off, the door opens and I hear everyone laughing as they enter. Luke is not laughing and telling everyone to screw themselves. One of the other guys sees me and blurts out, "Hey man." Luke says he isn't going on patrol with us anymore in your favorite spot. I just frowned and wait for stuff to calm down. A couple of days later, Luke and I are out playing babysitter to some scouts when out of the blue he asked, "What did you see that night?" I just shrugged and said, "I don't know, just my imagination getting the better of me probably." He then says something that sends chills up my spine. "I know you saw her, I saw her too. Tell me I am not crazy." I felt numb and just said, "You're not crazy. Where did you see her?" He then said, "Inside a tree." I had never given any information to Luke about what I saw or details that could have led for him to come up with the same conclusion. When I saw the girl in the tree, Luke was 40 meters away from my location and could not have even seen me looking at the tree. Every time I stay at my grandparents' house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other, and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14, when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they starting sleeping in separate bedrooms. Regardless, both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out and I refuse to ever go up there alone. I'm 23 now and still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my grandparents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of this story until I had to start sleeping in the other room. The room located directly below the scary room upstairs. We all go to bed and all the lights in the house are off. Being young and having no plan to go to sleep yet, I just laid there on the bed. Then I heard it. Thump, 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 starting at one end of the room upstairs. It got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks. But he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep. Then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock. Whatever it was on my floor of the house and sadly unaffected by the dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room. The dining room light was shining in, and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear, so I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard a scratching sound from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from too. My grandpa's gun case. It was a very obvious sound, scratching on the wood. Long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door ever so slightly tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandpa had made it to my room and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me, so I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room, and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying, 'I hear footsteps.' I slept under the bed for the rest of my week's stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night, but if it does, I don't want to know." For starters, I just want to say that I've never been the type of person that gets caught up in the idea of paranormal activities or ghost stories. To me, even at a young age, those types of stories just seemed completely unbelievable, and I could never take them seriously. With that being said, what I'm about to tell is something that happened to me a few years ago that pretty much changed all of that. It's not an overly scary story, but I think the simplicity of it is what creeped me out as much as it did. My mom was in the real estate business, which often required her to check out houses on her own before taking costumers with her. She would usually just do this on her own, but every once in a while she would take me. Well, this house comes on the market that many other agents apparently say is haunted, and my mom figured she'd take me along. I'll be honest, the house was pretty creepy, completely covered in vines, but whatever, it's an old house. Not really a big deal or out of the ordinary. We go in and look around the first floor, and for the most part it seems like most houses she takes me to, still furnished and has that smell of a house that's been empty for a while. The first thing that struck me as a little bit odd was that they had one of those old-style box TVs, and it was playing some old black and white World War II documentary, and it just made the house seem really old and gloomy. We eventually made our way upstairs to look at the bedrooms. The second floor was set up so that there was one long hallway with 2 or 3 doors staggered down its length. The first room was normal enough, but as we got to the second room, we saw it was completely full of stuffed animals, and not the toys, but a whole room dedicated to real stuffed animals. Even though I thought that was pretty strange, the room was fine besides that. Pretty neat and nothing out of place. Wanting to get out of the room, we went down the hallway to check out the final bedroom, which again was fine. We're on our way to go downstairs, and for some reason, as we pass the second room, I look back in and immediately stop in my tracks because there was now a chair directly in the center of the room. We were both positive it wasn't there before, since we would have literally walked into it when we were in the room before. But nonetheless, there it is, sitting directly in the middle of the room like it was meant to be there. Obviously, we got out of the house pretty quickly after seeing that. It was something so simple, but what really got me was that there was no explanation for it. We were the only two in the house, and neither of us went off on our own to check out a room without the other. So how the hell does a chair randomly move in arguably the weirdest room in the entire house? I'd consider myself a pretty logical person, and the fact that I can't think of a single explanation for what happened is why thinking about that house still bothers me so many years later. On a side note, in the few years after we looked at the house, it has sold 5 or 6 times, with almost all the homeowners saying that strange things would happen when they were in the house, like someone didn't want them living there. Back when we were about 14, my friends and I went up to stay at our buddy's family farm in rural New Hampshire. Not much up there besides farmland and miles of deep woods. It was around midnight, and we had just spent a few hours messing around, smoking cigars and building a bonfire up in one of the cow pastures. To get back to the house from the pasture, you needed to walk about half a mile through the woods and across another field, and the kid's dad had a tradition of messing with us on our way back. The usual routine was waiting on the porch and shooting Roman candles at us as we crossed the field. We started walking back, and as we emerged from the path, we started hearing loud, rustling noises in the trees along the edge of the field about 70 yards away. We all ran into the middle of the field and hit the deck smiling, thinking my buddy's dad was about to start shooting fireworks at us. After about 5 minutes of the intermittent leaf rustling and no Roman candles, our smiles were gone, and we started debating if it was a black bear or some other big animal. The rustling was distinctly the sound of footsteps, and would pick up and suddenly stop as if someone was running tree to tree. Thoroughly freaked out, my buddy pulls out his cell phone and calls the landline at his house. He stands up and walks a little in the direction of the house, while my other friend and I stay laying down, staring in the direction of the noises. Suddenly, something runs out of the tree line. I will never forget this image for as long as I live. We were still about 50 yards away, and there was only a crescent moon out, so there wasn't much light to make out fine details. But we watched as this inhumanly tall thing strode across a portion of the field and then back into the trees. It was skinny, with disproportionately long limbs, and in the dark appeared to be a solid light gray-white color. As it ran, its incredibly long arms and legs swung in this disturbingly unusual way, and it appeared to be moving much faster than it should have been. As fast as it had appeared, it was gone back into the forest. My friend and I looked at each other in silent horror. We stand up, ready to book it back to the house. My other friend walks back over to us, oblivious to what we just saw. His dad picked up. He said he's been in bed for an hour. Without saying anything, me and my friend who witnessed it started sprinting for our lives back to the house. The other friend follows suit. We make it back, lock all the doors, and recount what we saw to the other friend and his dad. None of us slept that night. When we went downstairs in the morning, my friend's dad, whose bedroom was on the ground floor, tells us how throughout the night he heard something banging on the side of the house and windows, and claimed he went out several times with his shotgun to find nothing. We thought he was just messing with us at the time, but to this day he stands by that story. As someone who doesn't believe in the paranormal, it's not a story I tell often, but the two friends who were there and I still talk about regularly, and it scares the hell out of us. Just this year, I shared it with another buddy of mine who loves that type of stuff, and after a quick Google search, he showed me an article about the wood devil along with a few others. When I saw it, I nearly shat my pants. The description and depiction of this creature from local folklore matched what I saw perfectly. I honestly don't know what to believe, but I know what I saw, and it's safe to say you're never going to catch me in the New Hampshire woods past sunset again.